friends, my name is Katie. Welcome back to my channel, Life Between Words. To celebrate Mother's Day, I thought that I would ask my mother to join me for a little bookish chat. She is one of the biggest reasons that I am a reader myself, and she is a reader. I thought it would be nice for Mother's Day to talk about her bookish life. So, welcome to my mom. Her name is Ellen.
Hi.
My mom was just reminding me today of a story about when she was pregnant with me, and she was talking to a dear friend of hers, and her friend was asking her what was one of the biggest wishes, biggest hopes she had for her children. And my mom's answer to that was that her kids would be readers. And I think it's pretty safe to say that that is the case, at least with me, but both my brothers too. I have two brothers, and both of them are readers as well, at least to a certain degree. Do you have anything to add to that, Mom?
Yeah, it wasn't necessarily our biggest hopes, but we were pregnant for the first time. My friend's name was Ingrid. We went to high school together, and this was after college, and we were talking about things that we hoped for our kids. And one of the things was I really, really wanted to raise readers. I think that it's such an important and rich experience in my own life that I wanted that for my kids.
I want to know some of your favorite books from when you were a kid.
Well, can I share with you some of my early memories of reading?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
So my own mother and father both read to us, and in addition to that, when we would go to bed at night, my father would come in and tell us stories. And I was one of 4 kids, and each one of us, he would ask us to give him an ingredient for the story. So we would just randomly think of an ingredient, and he would tell us stories, and I loved that. I just loved. And he seemed to be able to make these stories up just extemporaneously. But I also remember being read to, especially when we would go on long trips, my mother would read to us in the car. Mm-hmm. And sometimes we were so excited about the story that we were reading, we would get to our destination and we didn't really care so much the place that we arrived. We wanted to get into the hotel room or the motel room and listen to my mother continue to read us the stories. I also remember sitting on a couch with snuggled up next to my mom and having her read stories to us, and it was just such a comforting memory.
Can I interrupt just for a second? Because I remember Grandpa telling us stories growing up, the same thing where he'd ask us to give ingredients to tell the story, and then he would tell the story. I mean, what a good imagination, because I don't think I could do that.
Yeah.
I remember one particular time, I was probably about 6 or 7, and The Little Mermaid had just come out.
Yeah.
And I always, growing up, if I really loved a story, I always wanted to know what happened after the happily ever after.
Yeah.
So I would ask him to tell stories about the Little Mermaid, and I remember one particular time asking him to tell a story about the Little Mermaid being pregnant with twins. And I remember him laughing pretty hysterically at that, but he did it.
Yeah. Yeah, he was very good at that.
I interrupted your train of thought.
That's okay. One of my earliest memories was wanting to learn to read so badly and I was pretty sick as a kid. So I spent a lot of time sitting in doctor's offices, and I can remember placing myself, and I got to know the receptionist and the nurse and the doctor, placing myself directly in front of the receptionist's desk with a book to show off that I could read. I couldn't read, but I wanted to pretend that I could read so that I could impress her. And the dead giveaway that I couldn't read was when she said to me, "Ellen, is that book upside down?" And it was. In first grade, I was so eager to learn to read. We had, at the back of the room, we had kites, and for every book that we read, we had a little tail that we would put on the kite with the name of the book that we read. And my kite had the longest tail. It went down the wall and out across the floor, across the room. And later, when I was much older, I went back and looked at some of my report cards. And in grade school, one of the teachers remarked, "Ellen often has her head up in the clouds and her nose in a book." Yeah.
So actually, I think that's a good tie-in to telling me some of the books that you loved when you were a kid.
Oh, golly. Well, I loved Pippi Longstockings. I loved Ellen Tibbets because, of course, that was my name.
And Ellen Tibbets is a book by Beverly Cleary.
Beverly Cleary was really big when I was a kid.
I read Ellen Tibbets because you loved it.
Yeah.
And I remember loving that one too.
And Pippi Longstockings? Did you read Pippi Longstockings?
I don't remember ever reading Pippi.
Oh, I loved Pippi Longstockings because she was, my memory of that story was that she was kind of
spunky redhead.
Spunky. She was spunky and full of adventure.
I remember watching the show.
Oh.
When I was sick.
That's right.
You would often get me the show to
Yeah,
watch. So
yeah.
I remember watching the show but not
Yeah.
reading the books. Was reading a priority in your family?
My English granddad read a lot, and I have very fond memories of being over at their house, and he had a wingback chair, and he smoked a pipe, and he was a big user of the library, and always had books on his side table. So I remember him sitting there smoking his pipe, and I loved the smell of the smoke, and I loved seeing him handle a book and be, absorbed in his books. Yeah, reading was a priority.
What does your reading life look like today, and what books have you loved in your adult life?
Oh, some books that come to mind. Well, I loved Peace Like a River, by Lee Finger.
And you guys have all heard me talk about that because I mention it in almost every video.
Yeah, I have a first edition signed copy of Peace Like a River. I also loved Cold Mountain. Loved reading Cold Mountain. And Cold Mountain was interesting because I think that's such a distinctly American piece of writing. The adventure, the setting, the sparse use of words.
You've all heard about my love for Peace Like a River, and Cold Mountain actually, but I'd love to hear what you love about Peace Like a River.
It's been a while since I've read it, but my memory of it is the humanity in that book. He taps into what we can't see about the life that goes on around us, and the power of that life to transform us and to energize us, and even sometimes to rescue us from the really horrible things that happen to us. I loved that book. I haven't read anything else by him.
Last year I read a book by his brother called The High Divide.
Oh, a writing family.
Yeah, Lynn Enger is his brother's name. I didn't like it nearly as much as Peace Like a River.
What else have I loved? Oh, Unbroken. Loved Unbroken. Also have a first edition signed copy of that.
But it's not signed by Laura Hillebrand.
Yeah, it's not. It's signed by
Louis Zamperini.
Louis Zamperini. I'd love to get Laura Hillebrand's signature on there, and I think if I sent it to the publisher, I could probably.
I think you probably should do that.
I read a lot of theology. I've read a lot. Not that C.S. Lewis isn't necessarily considered a theologian.
He writes about the life of faith, though.
He writes about the life of faith, and he's also writes with tremendous insight and wisdom, but also with some humor and great logic.
Can I say something about your reading and her library? I remember, not so much now because I don't live with you, but when I'd have friends over and we'd get in discussions with you and you'd say, oh, I have a book that I'm going to give you, and you always seemed to have a book that was relevant to whatever we were talking about.
Oh, I still do that.
I'm going to tell you a book that I remember you reading out loud.
Okay.
I remember you reading out loud on car trips as well.
Yeah.
And I remember one car trip to Cedar Campus when you read Matilda.
Oh.
And I had already read Matilda, but I really wanted my parents to read Matilda out loud to us on the car trip, and I remember you laughing yourself silly.
Oh, yeah. That's a great book. My memory about Matilda was being in a bookstore once. I just think Roald Dahl is such a fabulous children's writer for so many reasons, because he kind of writes outside of the box a little bit for kids.
He writes scary things.
Yeah, he writes scary things, and sometimes they sound really mean, and kids love them. Although I remember being in a bookstore once and meeting a friend, running into a friend who was looking for a book for her kid, and I said, Roald Dahl is, just about anything, but we had just finished reading Matilda, and I kind of told her the outline, and she said, I would never read anything like that to my child. So I thought, okay. It's not for everybody, apparently, but you guys loved it, and it's true. I remember laughing so hard I cried. Oh, Secret Garden.
Did you read The Secret Garden out loud?
We read The Secret Garden on the way to Cedar Campus, and I remember becoming completely taken with that book.
Yeah.
So much so that when we got there, you guys ran off and played, and Bill and I went up to the room and
and finished it?
Read the book, yeah. Well, this is an interesting thing. I also collect different translations of the Bible. I have a thing about going into used bookstores and finding as many different translations of Holy Writ as I can find. They accumulate on my shelf.
What are some of your other bookish quirks?
Well, I passed this one on. It's genetic. I don't like to break the spines of my books. I don't like to bend pages, and it's sacrilegious to mark my books up.
Nonfiction, I tend to play a little fast and loose with that rule.
Yeah. Like my first edition signed copies.
Oh, I will not. I don't even read them.
I don't.
Which is really unfortunate. I feel like you should take them off the shelf and enjoy them, but
I really hardly let anybody else touch them, and sometimes I don't let myself touch them. I just gaze upon them. Oh, I collect library supplies.
Yes, you do.
I love to make use of library supplies, and we have a library supply store in the town where we live in. So I can get acid-free book covers for the books that I really want to preserve, and acid-free tape. So I have a whole section on the shelves of my bookshelf that for special books. It's the ones that nobody else is allowed to touch, and the ones that I'm not allowed to touch, except for when I put the covers on. And I really don't know anybody else in my life who collects library supplies and uses them quite like that.
No, I don't either. Mom, thank you so much for talking to me about your bookish life. And I want to have you on again sometime. And maybe you can take us on a tour of your shelves at home.
I would love that.
Yeah.
Because then it would shake my memory. Because I'm old and doddering, and my memory isn't quite what it used to be. So all sorts of things would pop up, and I'd say, oh yeah, that one.
We'll plan more of these. I know I had my friend Heather on a few weeks ago. I want to have more bookish conversations with some of the bookish people in my life, and that of course includes my mom. So this is one of the ways I wanted to celebrate Mother's Day, was to talk to my mom about books. So I'm so glad that you were willing to do this. I know it's not easy to sit in front of a camera when you're not used to it and talk to the internet.
Yeah.
But I love you very much.
I love you too.
Bye. Bye. All right, that's good.
I'm dreading this.
Mom, it will not
It's
turn out.
not articulate.
It won't turn out like that. It was articulate. I promise you that it'll turn out okay.